I'm 30 and don't have the best relationship with my husband's mom. Since day one, she tried to make remarks and compare me to her. She then tried to get on my good side and started overly praising everything I do and sometimes even copying me. Like one time when she literally dyed her hair purple just like mine, and when everyone pointed out how ridiculous she looked, she actually blamed me and accused me of trying to make a joke out of her. So anyway, my husband and I took 2 weeks off work to go visit some places out of the country. Tourism in other words. The thing is, I was the one who saved up for and arranged a trip. My husband was responsible for booking the tickets. My husband's mom wanted to come along and threw temper tantrums when I said no. She called, texted, sent people to talk to me into letting her come, even threatened to call the police and make some complaint up to get us to stay if she can't come. My husband said that we should take her, but I told him that he was wrong to tell her about the trip in the first place. He gave me an ultimatum. He said he wouldn't go if she can't come. I told him that I'd gladly call his bluff, which made him take back his words and say, fine, I'll tell her to stop it because we won't take her. Things got quieter. Suspiciously quieter. The day of the trip came and we got to the airport at 2 p.m. My husband was walking ahead of me and was looking left and right like he was looking for someone. I asked him, but he didn't respond. He led me to the waiting area and the first thing I saw was his mom standing there with her luggage. I froze in my spot. I felt a cold wave washing over me and I was fuming inside. She and my husband were hugging and that's when I quietly turned and started walking towards the exit. My husband followed me while shouting at me to stop. He tried to stop me, but I told him off in the harshest way possible. He tried to say that I was overreacting and that his mom was there anyway and that I should let it go and not mess his trip up for us. I told him that he and his mom could still go and I was going home. I went home and stopped into my dog's fur for several minutes. Turns out that he booked her ticket without me knowing. An hour later, he came home yelling and raging about how pathetic and spiteful I was to walk out and go home and ruin a trip last minute. I told him he caused this to happen. He said that I was being so hard on his mom, it's ridiculous. I refused to fight anymore, but he kept berating me and then called my family to tell them that the trip was canceled and it was because of me. My family said that I shouldn't have ruined it for myself and should have sucked it up and done my best to enjoy. Did I really overreact? So for more details about my situation, I have to admit that my husband's mom favors him over all of his siblings. This affected his relationship with them and me as well. He's never seen an issue with how differently his mom treats him. It bothered me and made me feel uncomfortable. The whole dynamic made me feel uncomfortable. Going low contact has never been an option, like he has to see her or call her every day. Most of his siblings don't talk to him and I 100% believe it's because of his mom's favoritism, like I said. He does bear some blame for not seeing how wrong it is until this day. In many instances, I even found myself making excuses for his behavior. I did so subconsciously and I don't know why, but I guess it's because of how much I love him and because I really want to be able to work things out without letting them affect our marriage. Regarding what happened with the trip, he tried to have a talk with me and most of what he said came from a place of blame. Blame towards me. I just couldn't continue with this argument. I told him that I needed space and I would be going to stay with my sister for a while. He didn't take it well. He literally got up from the couch and opened the door and telling me to go right then. In that moment, and seeing how he was still not anywhere near understanding what he had just did, made things perfectly clear to me. I just had pictured years and years of life being lived like that and I was like, no, I can't do it. Can't take any more of it, especially when he keeps focusing on being right every time. His mom can do no wrong. I'm always the aggressive, crazy, jealous, pathetic overreactor. Everyone's opinions, advice, and concerns were like a spark, like the wake-up call that I really needed. Though I wish it didn't get this far, but what's done is done. Right now I'm staying with my sister. I brought my dog with me as well. He sent me his last message telling me that I'm the one choosing to end what we had together, but I believe it's the other way around. Especially with how he keeps making his mom the victim in this situation. It's become clear that now we keep going in circles with no end in reach and I'm just so exhausted and overwhelmed. I'm not mad at him and I don't expect him to change, but at least I'm given options to decide what's best for me and my future, even if it's separation and divorce.
Story time about how I found my husband's secret phone. I found 5 dating apps and 2 secret girlfriends on his phone. And I can't even begin to tell you what I found on Instagram. Up until this point, my husband and I had the utmost respect and trust for each other. I never once thought he was capable of doing this. Literally every woman says that when they find out their man is cheating. Around 6 months ago, my husband started a new job. He's in tech and makes a lot of money, so I've been able to stay at home with our kids. We now have 2 kids and they're both 2 and 5. Our life is amazing. Our parents live near us. We always make time for each other and go out on dates. We even take solo trips on the weekends. Last year we went to Bali for 2 weeks. My point is we always make time for each other. When he started his new job, he started earning more money, but this also meant that he took on a lot more work. He was always so stressed out. My husband and I met in college and we studied the exact same thing. We both worked for the same company. Eventually I retired to take care of our kids. So when he got his new job, I offered to help him out with his work. He was actually really grateful for this and we were both doing a really good job. He was working from home 3 days out of the week. So it was a great situation. We were spending time together, working together, and the kids were spending more time with their dad. His new job gave him a new cell phone. And this is the cell phone that I would usually use to help him out with his work and his laptop. I started using his work cell phone to help him out with his job, and he kept his own cell phone. This is when I started noticing that he would make a big deal about losing his phone. Anytime he would misplace it, he would go absolutely berserk. Now I thought it was just because he was stressed about work, till I realized it wasn't stress. He forgot to silence his phone one night and the notifications were going off. I woke him up and asked him to turn it off. My mind did not go to him cheating. I thought it was work-related stuff. Then I realized it was his personal phone that was going off, not his work phone. The next day, he apologized for having his work notifications on, and I said, but it wasn't your work phone, it was your personal phone. And he said, no, it wasn't. And I said, yes, it was. And that's when he accused me of being paranoid and crazy. And that's when I knew he was cheating. I had to keep it cool though. I was feeding the kids in the kitchen when this all happened. On this day, he was gonna go to work. I knew that he was gonna take his personal and his work phone with him to the office. So what I did was change the phone phone covers on each phone and flipped them upside down. He grabbed the work phone thinking it was his personal phone. He put it in his pocket and went to the bathroom. And he left his work phone, which was his personal phone, on the countertop. I told him that maybe I should keep it just in case I needed to answer emails, and he said yes. He left and I had his phone all to myself. As soon as I opened his personal phone, I went straight to the messages and I found his two girlfriends, Laura and Missy. I started reading through the text messages between his two girlfriends. I scrolled and scrolled and scrolled. He had been together with the first girl for 2 months and the second girl just for 3 weeks. And in the messages, he was totally bad-mouthing me. He was telling them that I was crazy and abusive, and that's how he justified his cheating to them. I also read in some of the messages that he was complaining about our kids, how spoiled and ungrateful my kids were, and that's why he wanted to escape the house to be with them. Let me tell you, our kids are so considerate and so loving towards us. They're very affectionate children, and they never get upset at their dad whenever he has to go to work. So for him to be talking badly about our children just made everything 10 times worse. After reading the messages for about 2 or 3 minutes, I went to the bathroom and vomited. I was physically ill. His messages were so perverted too. I know that when you start a new relationship, you're always trying to impress people, but he just took it too far. After I vomited, I went back to his phone and kept reading the messages. This is when I found out that he was paying both of these girls' rents. So the whole time I'm helping him with his job to earn money for our family, half of that was going to these women. I got sick again. After I calmed down for a few minutes, I went back to his phone. Then I found his dating apps. His dating profile was so disgusting too. He was all about fitness and mental health. He also claimed that he was single in his dating profiles. So on top of him cheating on me, he was cheating on his 2 girlfriends. This time I didn't bother reading all the messages he had in the dating apps, but I did notice that he was going on dates with multiple girls several times a week. Later on, I found out that the whole work situation was a lie. He was working from home the entire time, but going on dates. I took screenshots of everything and went straight to my lawyer. I filed for divorce that very same day. When my husband came home, I confronted him and he denied everything. Even with all the proof, he's still denying it. He's not speaking to our children, and you better believe I'm getting half of all his money. Bye.
Hello, everyone. I'm Zoe. When I was a baby, my mom left me outside of a hospital. I never saw my biological parents after that. I got adopted when I was 2 years old. My new parents were amazing. They never made me feel like I was adopted. They made sure I had a wonderful childhood. But when I was 14, we all got into a terrible car accident on our way to go camping. I was the only one who survived. My life suddenly turned upside down. I had to move to a group home. Most of the other kids there were around my age. Children usually get adopted at a younger age. Of course, that makes sense. Who wants to adopt a teenager? Adoptive parents generally prefer younger children so they can raise them however they want. I was there for almost a year. One morning, I was told the director wanted to see me. When I walked into his office, I saw that he was there with a woman. She stood up abruptly when she saw me. She stared at me. She seemed surprised. Without taking her eyes off me, she said, "Mr. Brown, let's proceed with the adoption." That's when I realized this was an adoption meeting. My legs started shaking. She said, "Welcome to our family. I can't wait for you to start calling me Mom," and gave me a hug. Even though I was really excited, something about her seemed off. She was supposed to come pick me up the next day. I was waiting in the front yard with my friends. I was watching the street. All of a sudden, we heard a loud noise coming from above. We looked up and saw a helicopter. I've never seen one so close. We watched as it landed on an empty lot next to our building. Then someone got out and started running towards us. I couldn't believe my eyes when I realized that it was my new mother. In the next couple of days, I would find out that I was adopted by a billionaire family who got around the city in a helicopter and traveled elsewhere in their private jet. But because I didn't know this at the time, being picked up in a helicopter was a huge surprise. After a 30-minute flight, we arrived at a property outside of the city. It was surrounded by high walls. There was a huge mansion in the middle with various small buildings around it. A luxury car came to get me and took me to one of those small buildings. When I walked in, a woman in a maid's costume welcomed me. She was staring at my face in shock. She looked paralyzed. When I blurted out, "Is this where I'll be staying?" she collected herself. She said, "I'll show you to your room, ma'am." I followed her. She left me in the room for a few hours before coming back. "Miss Abby is waiting for you." Was Abby my new mother's name? I didn't even know. It wasn't. It turned out Miss Abby was in charge of my education. She looked super strict. She handed me a piece of paper. It was a class schedule. Appearance class from 9 to 11 a.m. Speaking class from 11:30 a.m. to 1 p.m. Behavior class from 2 to 4 p.m. She realized I had no idea what was going on and said, "These are your special preparatory classes. You'll be able to join the family once you complete this program." When she said, "We also request that you go by the name Nicole instead of Zoe." I was taken aback. Why? I asked. In a formal tone, she said, "This is yet another condition you must fulfill in order to join the family." I didn't quite get what was happening, but I didn't like the sound of this. And I didn't even know that this was only the beginning. The next morning, the first class was appearance. There was a hairdresser. The guy cut my hair down to my shoulders. Then he dyed it light brown. When the hairdresser left, Miss Abby said, "Nicole, from now on, this will be your hairstyle. You will measure the length every morning. Once it grows an extra inch, you will call the hairdresser. He will come and cut it to the required length." This was the most ridiculous thing I'd ever heard, but I didn't want to cause any trouble on my first day, so I kept quiet. The next class was speaking. Miss Abby gave me a handout. There were many words on it. "Nicole, memorize all these words. We want you to start using them more frequently in your daily conversations." I took a look at the sheet. It contained words like cringe, stan, bestie, pressed, vibes, cap. "Why do I need to use these?" I asked. "Nicole, please start memorizing them now. We're expecting you not to ask questions, but to do what we ask," she snapped. The third class was behavior. I learned a bunch of nonsense there as well. For example, I wasn't supposed to get up before 10 a.m., but I actually like waking up early. Even if I were to wake up early, I had to stay in bed until 10. There was another absurd rule about crying. When Miss Abby said, "You will not cry under any circumstances," I replied, "Well, I can't promise that. A person has a right to cry if they feel like it. You can't forbid it." Miss Abby frowned and said, "This is very important. You are not to cry even when you're alone." My studies went on like this for several days. I ended up focusing on the classes because honestly, there was nothing else for me to do. Miss Abby taught me a million weird things. For example, if my new father talked about work at dinner, I would have to roll my eyes and say, "Daddy, come on." I had to listen to music while I was showering, and of course, there was a list of songs I could choose from. I didn't know why, but I wasn't allowed to listen to music outside of the shower. One day at the end of class, Miss Abby said, "Nicole, I want to thank you for the effort you put into this. You have successfully completed your studies. Tomorrow you will move into your room at the main residence and live there from now on. Take this notebook. It has everything that you need to know. If you deviate from the rules, you'll move back here and we'll start studying from scratch." I was so happy to find out these classes were finally over. I'd begun thinking that this weird program would go on forever. "Can you tell me why I learned all this?" I asked. With her usual stern expression, Miss Abby said, "You'll find out soon enough." The next day, they took me to the mansion. My new room was massive and decorated in pink. I opened the closet. It was full of clothes that were mentioned in class. Was this place prepared for me? I looked around carefully. I went through everything. In the end, I figured out this room belonged to someone else, but for some reason, I had inherited it. After a while, a maid showed up. "Miss Nicole, your mother and father are expecting you at the White Hall," she said. I followed her. At the same time, I was going through the things I'd learned so that I wouldn't make a mistake. Everything in the White Hall was white. When I walked in, my new mom and dad stood up. My dad was looking at me as if he was under a spell. Then he gave me a hug and started sobbing. At the same time, he was saying, "Nicole, my sweet girl, my little daffodil, you see, we're together again." Then my mom hugged me. I was trying to understand what was happening. What did my new dad mean when he said, "You see, we're together again"? Just then I noticed a giant painting on the wall. It was a portrait of a girl in a white dress, just as the room called for. She looked so much like me that at first glance, I thought they had commissioned a portrait of me. But of course, it wasn't me. I turned to my new mom. I asked, "Who is this?" "It's you, darling. It's your portrait. It's been hanging there for a year. Who else could it be?" she answered. I didn't understand. I looked at my new dad. "Nicole, do you want to go horse riding tomorrow morning? I missed riding with you," he said. The atmosphere in the room was so weird. I could sense that I had to do something, but I had no idea what to do. What did this all mean? Why were they acting like I had always lived in this house? I started to cry. My new mom said, "Nicole, why are you crying? Didn't Miss Abby teach you that you're not supposed to cry? You never cry." And hearing this, I began to cry even harder. "My name is not Nicole. My name is Zoe, and I'm a crier. I might even be the biggest crybaby in the world. I cry at everything. I don't understand what you're trying to do, but I'm not Nicole. I'm Zoe," I said. My new mom grabbed my arm. "Your name is Nicole. You might have been someone else in the past, but from now on, you are Nicole. Tomorrow, you're resuming your studies with Miss Abby. It looks like the program wasn't quite enough for you," she screamed. I looked at my new dad. He was crying, but he wasn't looking at me. He was looking at the painting. Then he turned to my new mom. Leave her alone. She's not Nicole. She's not our daughter. Nicole is dead. No one can replace her. We can't bring our daughter back. You can't turn someone into Nicole just because she looks like her. Nicole is dead and no one can bring her back now, he said, and started sobbing. His wife went and hugged him for some time. They began sobbing together. 4 months passed after that night. You might be thinking that I went back to the group home. No, I'm still living with my new mom and dad because they came to my room the next morning. They admitted their mistake. They apologized to me. Our suffering clouded our thinking. We can now see how irrational it was to try to get you to do something like that, they said. Their daughter Nicole had been diagnosed with leukemia 2 years ago. The disease had already progressed too far. The treatments didn't work, and unfortunately, Nicole passed away last year. Because they didn't have any other children, they were incredibly distraught. They were both severely depressed. They were looking for a way to deal with the situation, and that's how they came up with this crazy idea. They looked for someone who looked like Nicole in all the group homes across the country. Finally, they found me. You already know the rest. They made my hair like hers, they dressed me like her, they tried to make me speak and act like her. I know it sounds preposterous, but they wanted to turn me into Nicole. However, that evening, they finally realized this was not possible. Thanks for listening to my story. You can subscribe to this channel now to get notified about new stories. Bye!